Hello and welcome to the county ground of Swindon Town, where today we're taking on Middlesbrough, who are back in the Premier League but are going to be defeated today by the Swindon Town Swiddly-Poopers. We need to win this game. We need to win all of our games. They're all important because Manchester United refuses to lose, and so they are still on top of us in the Premier League table. And they're on top of us in general. Right, so today I'm going to talk about how to create characters and the process of character creation, particularly in novels or other text-based forms of storytelling. And but first I got to give you a brief update on the Swiddly-Poopers here. Up front today we're starting John Green and John Green, teammates in life and in love, because it just seems appropriate. And we've got Leroy Williamson in the middle, anchoring the middle, and then in the back, Santa Claus, Hakuna Zapata, etc. All right. So the thing that I think gets forgotten about the process of character creation, I get this question a lot, like how do you make characters in your stories, or how do you make the characters in your stories so real, which is a very nice thing to say. Thank you to the people who say that. I get this question a lot, and I think the thing that gets forgotten in this whole process is that characters in stories, written stories, are made out of text. They are not made out of images, and they are not, and they are not made out of anything other than words. That was a terrible slide tackle. And we live in this massively image-saturated culture that is, in fact, so saturated with images, and that image is so central to the way that we define narrative that we can hardly even imagine sort of non-imagistic ways of thinking. And this leads to, for instance, the whole school of very unsophisticated literary criticism where people are like, I didn't like that part. Like there's the action-oriented, literary criticism that's oriented toward the action of the novel, the plot of the novel, and not also toward the language of the novel, because the language of the novel becomes less relevant in a world where image is everything, and so the actions of the story become the center of the story rather than it being also about the language and the way that language is constructed. So the first thing that I would ask you to do when creating characters, and the first thing that I try to do, is to remember that the characters are made out of words. They are made out of scratches on a page that then have a life in the mind of the reader. But the life in the mind of the reader is not exclusively or even primarily necessarily an image-driven life. It's true that these days we struggle to imagine anything in ways that are sort of independent from images. But that said, I think that when we are reading a book, we often don't think of the characters in strictly an imagey way. Like a novel, or at least a good novel, is something more than an inexpensively made movie, right? Like a novel is something more than just a movie that's made out of words that you then have to turn into images in your mind that play out like a film. A novel is far more complicated than that, and what's happening in the language of a novel is a lot more complicated than that. And when you imagine characters, you often don't do it, or at least I don't do it in a literally imagistic way. Like I don't, when I first read Harry Potter, I didn't think of the physicality of Harry Potter. Like that wasn't as central to his character as sort of his interior life and my own feelings of connection to his interior life. So that's really important. So while I do try to think about what a character looks like and what her sort of defining characteristics are, what makes her interesting, what makes her special, what does she value, and how does that system of values lead to the conflicts in her life and that kind of thing. I try never to forget that characters are made of language, and that you must be attentive to that. So a lot of the defining characteristics of characters in novels are language driven and ought to be. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing, that should have been a goal, but it wasn't. I feel like we're relying too much on the God. Guys, you're fast enough. You could do it. Good job. Anyway, I feel like we're relying too much on that strategy where you just try to throw it into the box, and not enough on the strategy where you try to kick the ball into the goal. So I'm going to try to switch to the kick the ball into the goal strategy. But anyway, so I like to think about, when I'm thinking about characters, I like to think about them in relationship to each other. In the same way that I think that's how humans are ultimately kind of defined. Like, we are our relationships to one another. And a lot of what is interesting about us happens in the context of other people. And I also try to think about, conflicts. A lot of times, this is true not just with characters in novels, but also with people. A lot of what we just needed the Y button. A lot of what kind of defines character, you often hear this, is hard times, right? Like, you hear that in hard times you find out who your friends really are, and you find out the true character of people. I think that's a bit exaggerated. Oh, gosh. My celebration was about to be exaggerated, but why do I keep throwing it in the box and just expecting good things to happen? That's not how life works. Context is everything.
Maybe that's why we're level at the break. Yeah,
sorry. I don't think there's ever been one that made me that happy. Okay, but it is true that that conflict does in many ways define us and define our experiences, and I don't want to. I just needed to pass. I don't want to deny that. So I do think about, like, what are the internal conflicts of this character, and then also what are her conflicts with other people in her life. What are the central challenges that she faces. And how does she cope with them? It's got to be, but it isn't. That was set up perfectly. I'm going into attacking mode. We'll see how that works out. Sometimes it works. That was a great slide tackle. So I try to look at conflict. I try to remember that characters are made out of words, and then I also try to remember that characters, while they need to be real to the reader, do not need to be real to me, and that they remain kind of like my own constructions. But I need to be invested and empathetic toward the characters in my novels. I need to care about them, and I need to, even if I don't like them or I don't agree with the choices that they make, I need to understand the value of those choices. And a big part of writing for me in general is sort of the process of, like, trying to learn to be empathetic, even though, often, I don't know, like, it's lots of times the characters in my books do things that I wouldn't do or that I wouldn't agree with. But that's a very important. That's kind of what's interesting to writing about me, or interesting about writing to me, is that it is a chance to live in someone else's shoes. And just as one of the pleasures of having this sort of non-image-driven relationship with a character is that you're able to empathize with someone you can't picture in some ways, I think, better than you're able to empathize with people you can picture. Ball John Green, why did you not go to the middle where you belong? That is where your heart is in the middle. Okay. That's Holden Goldfield. What are you doing? Oh, and then a very belated slide tackle. We need some changes. Because, like, when you're reading Harry Potter and you picture Harry Potter, you don't think of, or at least when you're initially reading Harry Potter, like, first-time readers of Harry Potter are able to read that story without thinking of Daniel Radcliffe, or even picturing anyone specific. I'm going to put in a new target man, and it's going to be D. McGoldrocks. The thing, that's a mistake, isn't it? It is a mistake. It is a mistake. I've got to put in John Green. Got to keep John Green in the game. He's an 80. Oh, I think this is the best team we have going forward. I think right now this is what we need. And then maybe if we need a miracle, we'll bring in Jesus Angel, because sometimes when you need a miracle, that's when you call on Jesus Angel. So at least that's what works. That's what works for me when I'm thinking about characters. But I don't think that there's just one way to do this stuff, and I also don't think that my way is necessarily the best. One of the reasons that I spend so long writing first drafts of my stories is that it takes me a first draft to get to know the characters and to understand what's important to them and to understand what's going to define them in terms of language. Like what kind of words are they going to be made out of? Because that's when they start to feel real to me. And it's not a matter of being able to quote unquote picture them. It's more a matter of being able to understand them and imagine what it's like to be them. That's the sort of centrally defining thing. Oh, there it is at long last. Yes. Oh, he's big, he's tough, he has a brilliant puff. Other John Green. Man, he went down like he'd been shot. It was a beautiful celebration. It turns out that throwing it into the box does sometimes lead to you getting exactly what you wanted. So that's encouraging, at least. Let's see if we can get another goal, though, with sort of new school Swindon Town Swidwee Cooper football. Now, they say that when you are up 1-0, you should never go into ultra-attacking mode because it's bad form. But they don't know about Manchester United's crazy goal differential. So I'm going to go into ultra-attacking mode to try to score a second goal here while Middlesbrough have their feelings hurt. Oh, no. Turn it around. Stay calm, and then go ultra-attacking. Good job. There's S. Holden Goldfield. He's tired, but he's still going. Oh, look at that. That guy, he can just go on a run. Look at it. He doesn't give up. He has no quit in him. Oh, he had a little bit of quit in him there at the end, actually. I take it back. So I really think it's helpful to think of to try to divorce yourself from the culture of image saturation and to try to understand that the people you're writing about are not characters in movies. They're characters in novels, and that those people are going to have sort of fundamentally different ways of being. Because they're going to be made out of words instead of being made out of images. But that's a lot of what I find powerful about writing is that the characters have a life for me that they can't ever have in a movie because in the movie their lives are so tightly defined. So I know other John Green is upset because he was going to get on the end of that if it had been long enough, but it wasn't. Boy, that was again a context is everything moment. Thank you for watching. Our opponents are smelling their pits in shame, as it should be. Best wishes.